Welcome to Educate, Agitate, Organise Saturday. My name's Matt Nathan, and this week I'm delighted to be joined again by my co-host Jane Aitchison. Jane, how are you doing?
Oh, hiya, Matt. I'm absolutely fine.
Jane, who have we got on this week?
Well, people will remember that last week we had Howard Beckett on, and he was fantastic talking about ending fire and rehire. And he talked really passionately about the Goodlord dispute, and we were going to get some strikers on from that dispute. But then we've heard this week, shockingly, they've been sacked. So we're going to listen again to what Howard said about this dispute, just briefly, and then we're going to hear from one of those sacked strikers.
Good Lord, or as the slogan says, Matt, you say good Lord, we say bad Lord. So Goodlord is a tenancy agency, and they have a load of young workers for them. And obviously, most of what they do is online. Big section of it is about student renting. I'm very close to the dispute because they're wonderful, wonderful people. These are young people, mainly women migrant workers who researched what trade unionism was about whenever this was announced to them and joined Unite and are now taking industrial action. Now, what Goodlord has done in respect to this is just quite extraordinary. This is a company making millions of money. Some entrepreneur who set it up, millions backed into him, making millions, going, prestigious offices in Brick Lane in London, driving around in whatever flash vehicles he has. And because of the pandemic and because his workers are able to do their job from home, he said to them, now that you can work from home, I don't need to pay you the London living wage anymore. So I'm firing you and re-employing you. You're going to lose £6,000 a year each. You're going to go below the London living wage, but that's okay because you don't have to live in London. Well, these people are obviously signed into tenancy agreements. They have to live in London, and he's taking them below the London living wage. But we're exposing them. They're continuing to take industrial action. We will be attacking his reputation in respect of Trustpilot. If you can't trust this man with the way he treats his workers, why would you trust him with a tenancy agreement? And we'll be expanding it out. And the reason why I talk about it all the time, Matt, is that I say anybody who thinks that young people do not understand the power of a collective, look at a dispute like Goodlord. Hey!
In last week's episode featuring Howard Beckett on the egregious practice of fire and rehire, Howard made reference to the Goodlord dispute. This week, I'm really, really pleased a worker from that dispute has agreed to speak with us. His name's Scott, and I'm really, really delighted to welcome him onto the programme. Scott, thank you for making the time to speak with us this week.
Hi there. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So, look, I know a lot's happened this week, but I think it's probably quite important if we just sort of go back to the beginning and just sort of for the benefit of the people watching who might not be familiar. Well, what is Goodlord? What does the company do? What was your job there?
So Goodlord is they describe themselves as a property technology company. What they actually do is they provide referencing services for estate agents. So when estate agents rent out property, they do a background check on their tenants, they do a credit check, ID, etc. And basically Goodlord is a company to which they outsource that service. So they do all the referencing stuff. And then in turn, they use that as a platform to sell stuff like insurance, or they're a middleman. They're a middleman for like insurers, for utility companies, and that kind of thing. And they provide kind of software tools to manage rental properties, kind of rent collection and so on.
Is it fair to say the kind of core of what they do is basically deciding if someone can afford to live somewhere?
Yes, essentially.
Okay. I think that's important to remember for later on in this conversation.
I worked in the actual referencing department, so we did the nuts and bolts work of checking people's ID, checking people's, getting job references, all that stuff. Already the lowest paid people in the company, I should add, and up until January this year, my colleagues and I were all employed on 6-month rolling fixed-term contracts. I actually started at Goodlord in January 2018. I started as a temp. At that time, everyone was temp from an agency, nearly everyone in the department. They moved to rolling fixed-term contracts. And then in November 2020, they announced that they would not be renewing our fixed-term contracts, but instead they would be offering new permanent contracts on much worse terms and conditions. So they wanted to, first of all, cut pay. They wanted to cut pay by about 20% to below a London living wage. They wanted to make other cuts as well. They wanted to cut hours. So they wanted to cut the working week from 40 to 35 hours. So that's a net reduction in 35% in pay, essentially. If you take the cut to your wages and the cut to your hours, it's a 35% reduction overall. They also wanted to cut back sick pay. They wanted to cut us back to just 3 days paid sick leave a year, during the middle of a pandemic. They wanted to cut maternity and paternity benefits down to the legal minimum. And they wanted to... they basically wanted to enforce mandatory shift work. They wanted to say, you work when we say, basically, evenings, weekends, whatever. Obviously, we were not very happy about this. At the time, we were about 40 strong in the department. So we started by talking amongst ourselves and trying to build some movement to resist this.
So Scott, how did you go about building that that union density? Because it wasn't a union workplace, was it?
No, it wasn't. But I think there may have been one or two Unite members, but there was no recognition. There's still not recognition. Legally speaking, they've not recognised us. But yeah, so we were basically completely unorganised before. That's my first bit of advice. If people want advice, is start now, because we got caught on the back foot. We started organising once they announced these cuts. It would have been nice, if we'd been doing something earlier. But so in terms of how we went about building it, it's mostly through personal connection, right? So it's about talking to people, starting just a few of us who, kind of know each other and know that we're all kind of sympathetic to a union cause. It's approaching people who you think will be sympathetic and, trying to bring them in. There's an exercise which most people in a union might be familiar with. It's called mapping your workplace. So you start with yourself in the center, and then you, in a circle, you draw a circle, and everyone closest to you is everyone who you know is pro-union, and then sort of union sympathetic, then neutral, union, anti-sympathetic, anti-union, etc. So you want to try and build your way out from there. So both because you want to approach people who won't run to management until you're ready, and to try and build out organically from that. There's also... Sorry, go ahead.
No, continue, please.
And also to try and identify people who can, who command respect, who can move other people to action is also very important. Right up until now, morale is still high. We're still ready to fight this. And that comes from the connections you make with other people, the fact that you stand in solidarity with each other and that you are kind of comrades together. So that kind of solidarity is built through time. It's built through personal connection as well, and through keeping up that connection, through having a WhatsApp chat, through me seeing each other on pickets, through Zoom meetings, etc. So right now our status is, we are ready to keep fighting. I think none of us is ready to give up, and we can do that because we have the support of our union. Unite has been very supportive.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, from what you're saying, that's the clear lesson, isn't it? First of all, you've got to build those bonds of solidarity very carefully and slowly, but really importantly, don't wait until there's a crisis.
Yeah, be proactive.
Yeah,
and there's plenty of advice out there. I didn't know how much advice there was until I looked. So check out, I'm sure on Unite's website, or every major trade union is going to have a lot of advice about organising, about recruitment. There's a lot of free kind of training seminars you can go to as well out there, which you might just have a search around. And there's a lot of resources. So the company conceded on everything but pay, essentially. Working didn't reduce hours. Paternity and maternity pay, they went back on that. They went back on sick leave as well. And they stopped mandatory shift work. So they conceded. We had victories on all those points. But up until now, we've been at loggerheads about pay, essentially.
Pay obviously huge. Yeah. I mean, it's a critical issue anywhere, but particularly in London. I mean, these are. I mean, rents are so
exactly
enormously high. Cost of living, all the rest of it.
A major issue. We all lost between £4,000 to £6,000 a year. In terms of pay, and what we've been asking for was a London living wage, which is actually it's less than we were on before. So actually, that is our compromise, is we're only asking for a London living wage, which is still a compromise. We'd still be taking a pay cut if they gave us that. But the company has been very insistent that they do not want to do that. The justification that they've used is they've said that because we'd worked remotely since March last year, they said, well, we're going to make them remote-only contracts, and that means you don't need to live in London. Therefore, why should we pay you a London living wage? Which we do not agree with, of course, because that's basically. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's quite all right. I just it's important. This isn't based on need. They're not losing. They've made a lot of money during this pandemic, haven't they?
Yeah, there's no evidence that the lettings industry has been at all affected by the pandemic. And, speaking as to how we were working, before we went on strike and, talking to some of the people who will still work there, volume of work has been up and up. Goodlord in the last year, they acquired, just before the pandemic, they acquired £10 million of investment funding. They also acquired a competitor directly before the pandemic. And there's no evidence that volumes of work have gone down. In fact, their business has only gone up.
So this is just greed.
Oh, yeah, it's them taking advantage of the massive recession that we're in to cut wages because they know that a lot of people don't have many options. It's also them using, the fact that they can basically the greater labour pool that they have in remote work to depress wages as well.
And of course, the cruel irony is because rents are so high in London, because the cost of living is so high, if you attack people's income in this way, a company whose job is to decide whether people can afford to live where they want to, is essentially saying we're gonna create a situation where our workers can't afford to live.
Oh yeah. In London. I mean, we all know how they do their income calculation, and all of us would not pass the income test that they do on the wages they propose paying us for the properties that we're in. And, that's forcing us out of our homes, of our communities. And we don't think, that's just not from a business perspective, it's not responsible forcing out your most experienced staff. And, from a people perspective, it's not responsible, forcing people either to, become unemployed, seek other work, throw them out of their jobs, or to move them away from the places they live.
And the justification has just been this flimsy, well, you can work from home. Have they said anything about the fact that people will have to move homes?
No, they've just said, essentially, if you don't like it, then, goodbye. They basically said, well, they've taken the line of, oh, well, we've not fired you. We've just not renewed your fixed term contract. Therefore, you should never have expected it to continue. Goodbye, basically.
So, before we get on to sort of where we are now with this dispute, I would like to just when you first started organising around this, obviously we were in the pandemic, there must have been enormous challenges. I wonder if you could sort of talk us through how you went about doing that.
Mm-hmm. Well, step one was to get people into a WhatsApp group. So we used a lot of WhatsApp, inviting people who I thought would be sympathetic. So I took a role in that. A few of, there are a number of others of us who were who particularly took a lead on trying to get organised, and from there, sort of building out and approaching people who we thought would be sympathetic, and trying to get our message to as many people as possible, while still trying to not alert management of what we were doing, because we know, and indeed the last 6 months have proved that they're incredibly anti-union and are not above using intimidation to try and break unions. So after kind of talking to people, the first thing that we did was file a collective letter. So most of the departments signed that. We delivered it to management saying, basically kind of using some soft language saying, you should reconsider this. You're disadvantaging us. We want to kind of. Oh, by the way, the decision to cut wages came out of a consultation process between senior management and an anonymous HR consultant, of whom we don't know the identity still. They never once consulted any of us actually in the role of what they were doing. As far as we're aware, they never consulted our line managers either, or even their managers. The first people to, it was exclusively senior management with an anonymous HR consultant. So, we were never consulted at all about what the structure of a department that we're working in might look like. which I think speaks to a severe detachment from management from the day-to-day workings of their company. But so the first thing we did was kind of take a softer approach and kind of say, look, consult us on this. We think we've got something to add. They basically said, thanks, but no thanks. And they said as well, they were very resistant to talking to us as any sort of unit. They would say, we're happy to talk to people one-on-one, but, we don't want to talk to anyone, any collective unit, obviously to fob us off, basically.
So they tried to isolate you from one another. They said, don't collectivize, don't. Yeah. Okay.
And they continue to try and isolate us, right up until yesterday, essentially. The next thing, we started reaching out to several trade unions for advice, basically consultation. We had some good conversations with Unite. We had some good conversations with the Industrial Workers of the World and with Community as well, another union. They gave us some, we had some good consultations. Ultimately, it was Unite who we thought we had the best relationship with and seemed like had the best path forward. So we started to formally join Unite. We presented a second letter. We tried to raise a collective grievance. The company denied our right to a collective grievance. Again, they said you can raise individual grievances, but we won't recognise anything collectively. So when they rejected that, that's when we took the ballot to strike.
How critical has it been being in a trade union? And
it's been a godsend, really. So I don't know how I would have got through it without the backing of a trade union, because we couldn't have supported ourselves through this strike on our own. It's through our membership to Unite that we are able to receive strike pay, for instance, that we have. And just obviously the trade union world tends to run a lot on contacts as well. And it's being able to be put in touch with people who can come down to your picket line, who can help you, and so on. So it's been critical. We absolutely couldn't have done it without the backing of a union.
And so, and then there was a picket. How long has that picket gone on?
So we started striking. We took the ballot in December. We started striking in February, late February, February 21st, I think, or 22nd. We started striking, and then we've been on indefinite strike since then. It was 13 weeks.
So talk us through that. I mean, obviously, this is your as an organisation within Goodlord, this is your first industrial dispute, first sort of picket together. What was that like as an experience? What sort of support did you get from outside? How did you keep morale up?
Well, the support has actually been really wonderful. We not only had people coming down from the Unite community branches, Unite Housing, Digital and Tech, and so on, all the relevant branches. We've had other kind of related leftist groups coming down and so on, London Renters Union, and just individuals as well who are extremely, behind us. So the support has actually been rather breathtaking. I didn't know we'd get that much attention when we started. It goes to show. I always say, you never know how many friends you have until you look around, and you'll find them. In terms of our morale, we're a pretty tight-knit group. It's all of us, the most experienced people in the company. We worked together for a while, or in the department where I've been on strike. So keeping morale up, it was a mixture of getting meetings in, first of all, online meetings, and then pickets themselves are actually great for morale. Getting up there, seeing each other, especially in the pandemic, like it actually was our sole social interaction for a while to go out on those pickets. So actually seeing each other, keeping in contact, tends to be a good way to keep up morale, we find.
And you've had support as well, haven't you? Yeah. Am I right in thinking from other workers affected by fire and rehire?
Exactly. And the support, obviously, a major thing from morale was not only the support from Unite, but just how much fire and rehire, the solidarity we've been getting from across the country. So, we had great solidarity from, Manchester bus strikers. They did a wonderful video for us. I'm not sure if you've seen, as they won their dispute, got concessions from management. So that's fantastic. And they did a wonderful solidarity video for us. And all across the country, we've had people in similar situations giving and receiving solidarity. So it's made us really feel like we're part of a national movement.
And what about and outside of the trade union movement, the in the world of politics. Have you had support from local councillors, from MPs?
Yeah, we have had some support. Jeremy Corbyn came down to our picket line, and he's been very supportive. We have been in conversation with a few MPs. We did have email contact with the MP local to the business, so the MP for kind of Brick Lane, Tower Hamlets area. Their response was they have not come down to the picket line. I'm sure they have a lot on. Like, I don't want to point fingers or anything, but they replied, saying it's terrible, etc. But they so far haven't voiced their support publicly, which would have been nice to get more of a response from them. Unfortunate, but we have had some good responses from some other MPs in the London area.
That's great. And were you a trade unionist before this?
Well, I've always, I'm quite a left-wing person. I always had quite left-wing beliefs, but I didn't have much practical experience of organising.
And has this experience has it changed your politics?
It's been an education. It's been a real education. Yeah, I'm not. Has it changed my politics? Like, I still believe, probably even more strongly now. The same things that workers deserve more than the bosses, a greater share for a worker than the chair, as I'd say. And that it's desperately needed in these times to have a strong workers' movement, because I think, as we've seen, fire and rehire has become a national story, whereas 6 months ago, it wasn't in the news. Bosses are going to try more and more to pull these things as time goes on. And
talk us through. So we've had some pretty shocking news this week, haven't we? So
as of last night, let me just state. So we conducted the ballot. We got 12 weeks of legal protection from dismissal, as you get on a strike ballot. That ended last week. So we reballoted. We'd already reballoted, obviously, because you've got to do it a few weeks in advance. So unanimously, our group voted to continue to strike. So that new ballot period, that new strike period began on Monday. The company has decided unilaterally not to recognise that second ballot. And they've informed us as of last night that we are dismissed. So they have sacked us as illegally, essentially. They've sacked us despite the fact that we have a valid strike ballot.
And so what happens next? What are the next steps?
Well, it might, end up in court, perhaps. There are numerous avenues we can file a wrongful dismissal suit. Unite Legal is pretty confident that we would win that. We can if a company wants to avoid going to court, they can re-enter talks with us. And either, offer a way to continue to work on a living wage, or they may, wish to offer, they can offer us whatever they want. It's up to us to decide whether we accept or not.
So, Scott, you've talked, look, it's clear yourself and your comrades in this dispute, you've really built your confidence, you've built your solidarity, you've networked. Even after this week, even after this illegal firing, are you still confident you can do this?
Yeah, absolutely. For our case, legally, it's an open and shut case. Like, if we got to tribunal, we would win 100%. We know that. Honestly, I think this is an act of desperation from the employer. I think this, for our case, it's a group of bosses who, frankly, don't really know what they're doing, don't have any experience with trade unions, acting out of wounded egos, just trying to kick us, and get rid of us because we're inconvenient. I think they know. The press that we've built up around this already, I think they're very scared of that, very scared of what it's going to say about their reputation. And in doing so, they've acted out of desperation and only tarnished themselves more, right? So I think we're going to be able to put a lot more pressure on them. If they thought that we were doing a lot before, I think they're going to be, we're not going to go away. In fact, it's only going to increase in intensity. So I'm very confident that we're going to be able to get a resolution out of this in a quicker timescale than going through the court. And I would say, yeah. And for other people, it is a matter of perseverance, of support from your trade union, solidarity with each other. It's really vital to be confident that none of your comrades, none of your fellow workers are going to break, because this company, they've done everything they can to try and isolate us, right? They very careful to, they don't to not try and any communication they want to do with us, they send us out individual emails saying, dear Scott, really would like to have a chat with you about this. And we just had to say to them every time, go to our union rep. And they even name that in the notice of dismissal. It's kind of a comical thing, really, because they say, we tried to reach out to you numerous times, but we were concerned that you didn't reciprocate. And it sounds, in the wording of the letter, it sounds like they're just annoyed we wouldn't be friends with them, but we're not friends with them. They weren't friends with us when they cut our wages, and I don't see, and now they're surprised that we want to do things collectively. But that's the way, with all bosses, individualizing you is a way to limit your power, because they know they can just fob you off, essentially. They can say, oh, thank you for raising your concerns, we'll take it away. Nothing will ever happen. So it's essential to have that trust and that's built through shared action and shared struggle.
So people watching this, how can they support you?
Well, the major thing is we want to let them know, both as a group of strikers and as a union as well, that employers can't just flout the law like this, right? Like Goodlord has blatantly and knowingly disregarded the law. They've disregarded a valid strike ballot, despite the fact they don't have any kind of legal backing. You've got to get a high court injunction before you can disregard a strike ballot if you think it's illegitimate. So we can't just let employers think it's okay to flout the law like this. So we want to hit back hard. We are going to do a big picket. Next Tuesday, that's going to be Tuesday I'm just going to check the date, Tuesday the 25th of May, outside the Goodlord offices. So that will be starting at 11 o'clock in the morning, Tuesday the 25th of May. And the address it's Huguenot Place, Heneage Street. That's Heneage. E1 is a postcode. It's just off Brick Lane. So we would invite anyone who's willing and able to get down to join us at 11 o'clock on the 25th of May at that location for a mass picket. There will be more to come as well. I will, reveal. We're not going to. I think Unite and us are not going to take it, lying down. People deserve to know about this. It's going to damage their reputation, as it rightly should. People should know that they're dealing with an agency, with a company that doesn't care for the law, and that shouldn't be allowed. And
what would your advice be to workers in similar situations to yourself?
My advice would be to reach out to any organization that can listen, because we reached out to a wide variety of trade unions, and even those we didn't end up joining, we had very good consultations with and pointed us in the right direction. I would say there's a lot of work to be done, and usually not enough people to do it. If you're in a group, a leftist group, where there's not enough work to go around, then I'd like to swap places with you, I think, because usually there's more work for our people. So I would say, try and share the work evenly from those who can do it, but be appreciative that everyone's got different stuff in their life, and work out, approach the most sympathetic people first, and have a strategy for people who aren't so sympathetic. You don't want management to be aware of what you're doing until you've got all your ducks in a row, because they will try and intimidate you.
Scott, that's really fantastic advice. Thank you so much for your time. And if you're watching this, listen, if you're in London, try and get down to that picket next Tuesday, the 25th. We'll put details in the description. If you're watching this on Twitter or Facebook, go over to our YouTube channel. We'll have all the information you need in that description there. You've got a Twitter. Is that at Badlord? Am I right?
Is that So Badlord?
So Badlord.
Yeah, the company's Twitter handle is So Goodlord, so we are So Badlord, and that's the same on Instagram as well. Obviously, if you would like to let the company know your honest thoughts, whatever those may be, you can tweet at them, you can email them. I'll put a link in the description that has some nice email contacts that you can message just to let them know what you think. Positive or negative. I wouldn't want to influence your point of view in any way.
Scott, do you have any final thoughts, final message for the people watching?
People watching, thank you so much for your solidarity again. It's been brilliant for all of us, and we hope to repay that in the years and the months and years to come. We've had our turn. I mean, the dispute's still ongoing, right? So our turn, we're still having our dispute. But once we've had our turn, then to be fighting, there are going to be other people who need that fight as well. So we hope to return that solidarity. Thank you so much to everyone. Hope to pay it back.
Scott, thank you so much for your time.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
So I hope you agree that really important interview and really timely as well. Absolutely disgraceful that we're hearing this week that those workers have been sacked. Jane, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, wasn't that just absolutely shocking to hear what a greedy boss that is, making all that money, not suffering in lockdown in any way, but choosing to make more money by squeezing their employees so hard that they've been forced to strike like this for weeks and weeks and weeks. And now, of course, sacking them, the ultimate way of making more money because they're going to just take on staff on a cheaper rate.
Absolutely. And we cannot afford to lose this dispute. It is so important. 1.3 million workers on fixed term contracts in this country.
You're dead right, Matt, you're dead right. But I mean, I thought that lad was an absolute inspiration, and all of his colleagues, of course. And it showed, we talked last week about how anyone can be affected by fire and rehire. But what he showed is actually anyone can fight back, because he wasn't in a unionised workplace. There wasn't a union. But what they did, they organised through WhatsApp, and then they talked to all different unions and got themselves a union. Absolutely inspiring. And it really does show we can all fight back, and there is an appetite out there for it, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've got to give these people our solidarity. We've got to help them in any way we can.
That's a good point. And I think this week, more than any ever, really, there's so much we can do to show solidarity with these young people, and they desperately need it. We can first of all go along to their mass picket. If you live in London, I know you do, you're going along. It's a long way for me, but others will be able to get down there. There's all sorts of e-action that we can take. We can be supporting them on social media, definitely, but also, and letting people know about this dispute, because it's only small, but it's important and significant, isn't it? And that Goodlord employer, they should be ashamed of themselves. Let's make them feel that shame by getting onto their website, having a look at their Trustpilot. I mean, would you trust a company like this? I wouldn't trust a company like this. So there's all sorts of things that we can do. Calling our MPs. We need to end fire and rehire, definitely. We know that. But also, we need to stop these illegal crackdowns on legitimate trade union activity like this strike. So there's all sorts of things that we can do, aren't there, Matt?
Absolutely. And look, if you're in London, I mean, we'll put a link up, but use the Write to Them website. You find out who your MP is and your councillors are. Write them, because just because that company is down on Brick Lane, those workers, they'll be living all across London. And now the shocking thing is they just can't afford to. I mean, I think there's a big thing here as well about what do we want our capital city to be like? Do we want it to be just for rich people and then just churn through workers that it just chews up and spits out? Or do we want it a fair place for everyone to live? It's
shocking. For years, I represented members who worked in the benefits system when 40% of them were on benefits themselves because the pay was so low. At the moment, our Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union have done a survey showing that 1 in 5 hospitality workers and fast food workers can't afford food for their own families. The fact that these people working for Goodlord are doing checks to see if people can afford to rent places that they know they wouldn't pass. It really is shocking. We need fundamental change. It's much bigger than just these strikes, just ending fire and rehire. We need to change society too. And that's what Don't Leave Organise is actually all about. And if people go on to our @Don't Leave Organise Twitter or on our Facebook page, we'll be tweeting out all of the ways in which you can help these strikers, because it's really important that we get behind them. We cannot lose this dispute. We've seen this week, fantastic, the Go West End Fire and Rehire dispute in the Northwest. We won that one. We can win. We must win. Absolutely, absolutely. Do you have any final thoughts this week, Jane? Join a union. Together we can win.
100%. So listen, if you're in London, get down to that picket on the 25th in Brick Lane. We'll put the links in the description. If you're not in a union, join one. If you don't think your union, your workplace has a union branch or any union density, start building that carefully and slowly now. Don't wait till it's too late. But most importantly, do not go gentle into that good night. Watch Educate, Agitate, Organise every Saturday night. Thanks, Jane.
Good night, friends.